Mike Owens here, joined by Dave Schmullenson, aka the Schmo, MMA media personality, and an inspiration to us all in the world of independent MMA content creation. Dave, how are you, my man?
I'm great, Mike. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate that introduction.
100%. Well, I want to kind of start with your setup because as the world has developed through COVID, a lot of MMA content creation has moved over to the virtual world as we're doing now. And there's a lot of perks of that by the fact that we're having this conversation. But you're a man who very much creates a lot of his content on the road. I saw you with Sean O'Malley yesterday. How is that for you? Is that a natural progression for you? Is it something that you're comfortable with being here, there, and everywhere?
Yeah, I think for me, the in-person interview is always something I valued. When I created the Schmo in 2015, obviously I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be unique, but that face-to-face conversation is something I've always valued. It doesn't mean the same while I'm doing it on Zoom. Not that having a conversation like this isn't valuable. If I was doing it as myself, as in this type of setting that we're doing now, it makes a lot of sense. But the character is goofy. I do a lot of unique things to get the best out of the person that I'm interviewing, showcase their personality. So that in person is very, very valuable. And like you said, like I was just with Sean O'Malley the other day in person. I really value that face-to-face relationship and conversation with the athlete.
Was it always important to you to do things differently? Like you have a very unique way of making content. Was it always a kind of important to you or critical to your development that you did things slightly different from everybody else?
You know, for years, when I graduated college in 2012, I tried to do things the traditional way, do sports broadcasting. Back then, it was try to break into a top 250 market in the States. Like the only bite I really got was in Dothan, Alabama, weekday news anchor, weekend sports reporter, something where you have to wear many hats to showcase your skills to do exactly what you want. And for years, I tried doing things the traditional way. And by 2015, I realized, look, no one's going to give me the chance. If you're not first, be different. I kind of created the character initially to kind of mock the system that I felt was broken, that was heading to this digital environment that we live in today. I kind of saw the writing on the wall that the traditional media was going away and this new digital social era was going to take part and take control, take over. As I say, take Schmover. And I just had to be different. If you're not first, be different, wanted to be unique. And I never imagined that I would be a full-time Schmo when I started. But, when something's working, you got to roll with it. But most importantly, you have to evolve. So something I take pride in is that I've been able to evolve with the character as time progresses. And I'm still evolving now and I'm still transitioning. And that's just something that's very important to me.
Yeah, 100%. I know, am I right in saying that you don't produce any written content as such, as solely kind of video interview based?
I first started by doing written content, like just to have a platform. But as the character taken over, as I've been the Schmo, it's correct that these days, especially the past few years, I don't focus on written content. I focus on video
Yeah.
content. Correct.
Well, I'm exactly the same. I'm video based or interview based only. So I'm interested to know what specifically attracts you to that form of content. Is there a certain buzz that you get from interviewing athletes? Is there something that you feel like you can get out in a video form that you can't in written? Why specifically interview
I
content?
think I think what you said, plus I'm an entrepreneur from a business standpoint. I know it's a far better business model for the video content. From my background, from my last jobs in corporate America before I went fully independent and investing in myself, I learned that video monetization was the best way to make a living on the internet, more so than written form. Not that written form has a negative way of living and you can't make money. You can make great money from the written content, but there's so much more value. There's so many different ways to monetize the video content. That's just from the entrepreneurship standpoint. But then from just a content standpoint, just to get more out of the athletes, it's so much more valuable doing the video content than just standing in front of them with a journal and writing things down. You're not building the relationship. They're not understanding who you are. You're not really fully understanding who they are. And it's, to me, far more of a challenge
Yeah.
than doing it the written way.
100%. One thing I admire about your kind of way, the way you create content, Dave, is the way that you create a very much a relaxing environment, you whether it be through jokes, whether it be through slightly off the wall questions, let's say, you very much relax the athlete in a way that I think anyone who interviews professional fighters and who knows the temperamental nature they can sometimes be will be certainly envious of. How can you give me some tips or tricks to how you specifically implement that relaxing nature that you show across screen?
For sure. First off, I don't come at it with an angle, an antagonistic angle. If you notice, I keep everything positive. Even if someone's coming off a loss, I find the positive ways to do it. And the whole idea here is to show that you can break news, you can create content by doing things in a positive manner. And I use humor to do that. Like, I obviously ask some fun questions, but people that pay attention to my work and someone who's studious like yourself, you clearly see that, look, I do use fun questions, but I use that to kind of bridge the gap into some of the tougher questions. Like, you could ask the same question as me, but how you deliver that question, the style you deliver that question, the mood you get the fighter in will determine what kind of reaction, what kind of response you get out of that person. So when I'm really want to get something out of somebody, I do my homework. I really know something about them. I know about their family. I know about their interests, things outside of the sport, things that make them happy. Like, I take pride in knowing a lot about the person, but outside of the actual fight, outside of the cage work, that I'm talking to, and building that relationship. And that's just something I really have that doesn't really show through necessarily through the character. Is I have good people skills. I'm really good at listening to people. I'm really good at understanding, and I'm not coming at it because I want something from them, like, oh, hey, do this for me, do that for you. It's like, no, it's like, I genuinely care. I genuinely love the sport. I want to build a relationship with someone, and I feel like that shines through the work.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one thing that people, viewers of content, maybe don't appreciate is that it's an art form. You're trying to create a piece of art with, and trying to get the right answers, or trying to get a nice piece of content out of that. And you'll know yourself a lot more than me, as you have some interviews that you come off and go, I absolutely nailed that. I'm so happy with how that went. And you'll have some that will be so-so, or maybe worse. Can you give me some specific examples of the kind of interviews that come to mind when you think of you're most proud of or you're most happy with? What ones initially come to mind?
It's funny you asked that question too, because most of the time, and you can ask Helen because it's literally her and I doing everything together. That's our team. And we both work for ourselves. So we support each other, but we're not actually even working for each other, which is a unique ideal. But most of the interviews I do, I walk away, I'm like, oh, that sucks. It's terrible. I have to watch it back to understand. But for me, it's all about flow. I come into an interview and obviously I have topics I want to hit, but the key is to listen to what the fighters are saying and go with the flow of the conversation. If there's key things they say to transition to the next topic, then you know. If they're really, really short with a specific topic, you have to read the temperature of the room, whether or not to pry and dig deeper or whether to not. And that's going to come into the relationship building side. But you brought up the Sean O'Malley from a couple of days. I was actually really happy with that because it reminded me of the original Schmo, why I got into it. I showed different sides. I really show his personality, show his farm, show something he's really doing. And then I'm actually able to ask him the fight questions. It's like, what I was really proud of is he addressed the fact, oh, I'm not afraid of Marab. I just don't know if he's best for business. Cheeto might be best for business. I'll do whatever the UFC wants. They want the rematch with Aljamain. They want the Marab fight. They want this person, that person. I'll take it. But I just think that Cheeto Vera, the rematch, is best for business. And I think that was such a genuine answer I was able to get from him. So I'm proud of doing something like that. That's just the most recent example that comes to mind. But I think when I'm able to have a genuine conversation that can flow, that could go from here to here and hit 80% of the things I had in my mind that I wanted to talk about, that's a winning conversation for me.
I love it. Well, listen, I want to get your thoughts on some of the announcements that dropped yesterday from Dana White, some of the upcoming UFC 295 and 296 co-main and main events. Obviously, we have Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira as co-main in MSG, and then we have Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington, and Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval for 296. Do these three fights to close out the championship quarter of the year, do these feel like the right matchups at the right time for you?
Well, I'm super happy they finally announced Leon Edwards, Colby Covington. We've been waiting months for that. And everyone was speculating, what's taken so long? Is it Leon's side? Is it Colby's side? And maybe we'll never get the full answer to that. But most importantly, I'm very damn happy we're finally getting that fight. If there was only one fight that everybody wanted to get before the end of the year, but he never really went back into the USADA pool, it's the Conor McGregor Michael Chandler fight.
Yeah.
So if there's any disappointment, which I'm not fully disappointed, I do like Michael Chandler a lot with a great relationship. I feel bad for him. So that's where I would say, shit, man, Michael Chandler. But from just getting Yuri and getting Pereira, that's huge. Colby, Leon, as a fight fan, and then Brandon Royval, Pantoja, that was a fight to make. I'm very pleased. Great timing to have me on. They made that announcement last night. That was awesome. I did not know that Yuri was going to end up fighting before the end of the year, transparently. I know they talked about it, but they also said he had the worst shoulder injury that the UFC's ever seen. And I've actually seen the video of him yanking it when he was in Extreme Couture, when his shoulder got popped out. It's not pretty. So I'm very happy he's there. This is a striker's delight. Both these guys don't have the best defense, but both these guys just hit like stone, and it's going to be an exciting fight. Whoever's going to connect first, someone I think is going to get knocked out in that fight. And that's, hey, as a fight fan, that is a dream. The pace for the Colby Leon fight is going to be something just to adore from the sidelines. Like, those guys are going to put on a relentless pace. Obviously Colby Covington, he's known for his cardio, but we haven't seen him fight in a while. But that was also the knock on Leon Edwards for those couple of years. He was not able to get the fights during the COVID situation. We hadn't seen him fight for a while. What's he going to look like? Russ didn't seem to do any wrong to Leon Edwards in his title reign. Both those guys will put on a relentless pace. I'm excited that's going to be in my home city of Las Vegas, selfishly. That will be nice. And then Pantoja Royval. Brandon Royval's never in a boring fight. Pantoja looked amazing against Moreno. It will be fun fights no matter what. That's what I'm excited for.
If I had to say you had to buy one and sell two, is the one of those fights that you're particularly leaning towards?
Well, the fact that Prochazka and Pereira is on the fight card of Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, we didn't even bring that up. That itself is just the breadwinner. So if you're going to ask me who's got the best main and co-mains between December and November, I'm going to have to be real with you, and I'm going to have to say it's 295 Madison Square Garden, just by how you have Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, which, by the way, could be both of their last fights, regardless of the results, who wins or loses. Both of them could end up retiring that night. That's a possibility. You got Stipe, who's one of the greatest, if not the greatest heavyweights of all time. It's him and Fedor people debate between. You know, everyone who watches the UFC will easily say it's Stipe Miocic just by strength of competition. Jon Jones is the GOAT of mixed martial arts. That sells itself. And then we just brought up Pereira and Prochazka. Like, someone's going to get knocked out, so it's got to be that card.
Do you buy into the notion that the Leon Edwards Colby Covington fight is the main event of 296 because Jon Jones didn't want to fight on the same card as Colby Covington, or do you instead buy into the theory that they are potentially setting up a light heavyweight champion for Jon Jones to potentially go down, become champ, and retire as the two-way GOAT, the simultaneous champ GOAT?
You know, that latter that you just brought up, I didn't think about that. I didn't see that as potentially to lure him into going back down to light heavyweight to fight again. I don't personally see Jon Jones fighting at light heavyweight again. I think he spent the time to put on the muscle mass, to do the strength training. He will end his career in heavyweight, very similar to Daniel Cormier, how he ended his career in heavyweight. I just think that's going to happen. I personally feel like because of the bad blood between once roommates and Colby Covington, Jon Jones, that had more influence for why Colby Covington and Leon Edwards is not the co-main event for that fight card. However, that being the main event for December, the last pay-per-view of the year, that's great. And listen, from a business standpoint, I'm an entrepreneur. I feel like you pay less in taxes and you get more of your purse money by fighting in Vegas than you do in New York. So if I'm Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, that's still a win-win. And wouldn't you rather be the main event than the co-main event? It's a win.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, we've skipped a couple of pay-per-views ahead, Schmo, or Dave, I should say. So I want to move back a little bit to 294 since that's the next one that's coming up. UFC's return to Abu Dhabi. Considering that was the base at which Fight Island and kind of that very early post-pandemic run took place, this will be the first fight card in a year in Abu Dhabi, just behind 280 with the initial Makhachev Oliveira fight. Has this almost become a pay-per-view, premier pay-per-view location, do you feel, this October Abu Dhabi slot for the UFC?
I personally love Abu Dhabi and Fight Island. That's some of the best memories I'll have covering sports in my entire life. I'll never forget that. Being in the bubble and being there for the fights. I got to watch Khamzat Chimaev take 2 fights in a week's notice. That was like his first UFC fight. I remember in Abu Dhabi, for example. The fight fans there are incredible. The hospitality in Abu Dhabi is incredible. Outside of Vegas, you could say in that portion of the world, that has become the fight capital of that portion of the world, where Vegas is the fight capital of this portion of the world, in my opinion. I love it there. It's certainly a destination. And then Islam Makhachev, he is certainly a fan favorite in that region of the world. Khamzat Chimaev, he's becoming a fan favorite of that region of the world. So it is certainly a destination in the fall. And from a business standpoint, again, I totally understand it.
And when we look at the championship fight at the main event, we've got that rematch between Makhachev and Oliveira, as I mentioned. Now, it's a bit of a strange one because if the phrase "you're only as good as your last fight" is often touted round in MMA, and it could be argued that the challenger has the better last win than the champion, depending on how you look at the dominance of the first round knockout for Charles Oliveira over Beneil Dariush, and the controversial quote-unquote Makhachev decision over Volkanovski. How do you assess where both of these are at going into this rematch?
Listen, styles make fights, and you're right. From that standpoint, who's coming off the better win? It's certainly Charles Oliveira. That all matters. However, what matters most is these two have already fought each other. And when they fought each other, Islam won in dominating fashion. And who knows the psyche of Charles Oliveira going into that rematch? He's not going to show it. He's stoic. And what we've learned is to not bet against Charles Oliveira. But is Islam Makhachev his kryptonite? Is that someone who can nullify all of his grappling skills and just that sambo background, his kickboxing, his stand-up, how well-rounded Islam is, and also getting truly tested and looking human against Alexander Volkanovski? Does that light an extra fire under his arse? But also, Charles Oliveira, on the flip side of that, the confidence of knocking out Beneil Dariush, having faced this guy and just knowing the psyche of, okay, this is the level he's at. I need to raise my game. I don't want to do media like I did leading up to that fight. I'm solely all business. I think this is going to be a far more competitive fight. I'm not saying the result's going to be different per se, but it's going to be far more competitive. And I've learned to not bet against Charles Oliveira. But I do think, just from looking at these guys' statures, from just a physical strength standpoint, Islam's a physically stronger guy who is going to eventually compete in the 170-pound weight division. And Charles Oliveira, I believe, fought in the featherweight division before he fought at 155. I just think there's a general size difference between these two guys where strength is different. Not to make the Bradley Martin comparison, who would win in a street fight. I'm 260 pounds. It's completely different, but this is a unique scenario where I feel like both these guys have tremendous skill, but size is a factor.
We can't mention Bradley Martin because Chito Vera's currently said he'll play with his guts, so that's that problem taken care of. But I want to talk about Charles because he's such an interesting character when you look at his kind of career arc. Like, for somebody to have been finished in the UFC 7 times and yet go on to win a championship with 11 of 12 finishes on a row it's historic, just given the nature of the run. Like, people don't do that. People don't have those career turns for that sense of longevity. So I'm wondering if that kind of never give up attitude that Charles has shown, in a lot of circumstances, we would write off the challenger coming off a rematch less than a year ago, especially by dominant finish. Feel like Charles, if anyone can do it, Charles can do it. Do you agree?
Absolutely. If you look at Charles Oliveira, he's the epitome of why combat sports are the greatest sports on the planet. He's what makes the UFC brilliant. It's that anyone can win on any given night. And so many people, look at all the dog fights. Look at all the fights. Look at the Poirier fight. Look at the Gaethje fight. Look at the Michael Chandler fight. Everybody was writing off Charles Oliveira, and he had moments in all those fights where you thought he'd get beat. For him to come back and do what he does, finish fights, and do it in spectacular fashion, he's got this aura about him. There's something so special about him. And even as I've interviewed him as the Schmo, and we don't speak the same language, and there's translators communicating, I've always felt an aura with him of this sense of confidence and this greater human achieving greater things. And that's why I say I would not doubt Charles Oliveira. I would not bet against Charles Oliveira because there's just something so special about him. And I'm very, very interested to see how this fight goes. And I do know that Islam Makhachev is truly the real deal.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's very quickly just touch on the co-main event because we've got Khamzat Chimaev making his return versus Paulo Costa. Now, I actually was very lucky because on Sunday night, Gilbert Burns was in Liverpool and I actually interviewed him about this fight and he's hoping for a double knockout in this fight due to the hate on both sides, which is fairly unlikely. But all in all, how confident are you this fight will fulfill expectations on fight night?
Well, they got to get there first, right? Everyone is like, when are they fighting? When is this fighting? It's interesting because we haven't seen Khamzat Chimaev fight since he had that catch weight at 180 pounds over a year ago now against Kevin Holland. It's just a little over a year ago, but it'll be over a year since he's competed. Yeah. And then same with Paulo Costa fighting in elevation in Utah against Luke Rockhold. Both these guys haven't fought. However, this will be the biggest fighter, physically biggest fighter, because Paulo Costa is someone who's fought now at light heavyweight that Khamzat Chimaev has fought in the UFC. Khamzat Chimaev has fought guys that he's been bigger than, even when he's dabbled in the 185-pound division very early on in his UFC career. These guys were not the same size as him. So this will be one of those unique challenges where Paulo Costa is not going to be smaller than him. Paulo Costa has great wrestling defense. Paulo Costa is not afraid of him. And Gilbert Burns gave Khamzat Chimaev a phenomenal fight. He made Khamzat Chimaev look human. And Gilbert Burns is someone who's fought at 155 and then has now had so much success at 170. And Khamzat is the real deal. Paulo's the real deal. Both these guys dislike each other. It was in our Schmo Zone podcast studios where he stole Khamzat's hat, put it in his pants, got your hat, blah, 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 with the secret juice. Henry Cejudo was there. That was a funny moment. Schmoment, whatever you want to call it. These guys have bad blood. I think it's going to live up to expectations for sure. And before I would ever make a prediction, I want to see these guys weigh in on the scale. That's usually my rule with them. I got to see these guys on the scale, but I really do feel like this fight's going to live up to the hype.
That's a really interesting point. Something I wanted to mention as well, though. Like, what do you think the chances are? Khamzat brings a unique kind of intensity to a fight week. I think in some ways, and as exciting as it is watching him fight, it's also as exciting watching the pre-fight build-up. He's one of those fighters. He's got that McGregor-like touch where every piece of content that comes out of him, you just have to consume. I'm wondering if you think what the chances are of another crazy UFC 279 like fight week we could see in Abu Dhabi.
The content's going to be great, but here's the thing with Paulo. He's not going to back down. Paulo is a troll himself. So we might get great content out of Paulo. I'm sorry, out of Khamzat. I'm sure we will, but we will for sure get great content out of Paulo too. We'll see which side gives more to who. I mean, but it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth the price of the pay-per-view if these guys show up during fight week, and it's going to be awesome. I can't wait, but it will be one of those unique situations where that aura of Khamzat and how he's had that invincibility going into fight weeks, I don't think it's going to be the same with Paulo Costa. I truly don't.
Yeah. Well, obviously we've talked a lot about fights that are currently booked as we kind of get towards the final quarter of the calendar year of 2023. What is the fight that you're most looking forward to that isn't currently booked? Maybe if it's not currently on the horizon or currently being talked about, is there a fight that you look at and go, that's the one that I want for the first quarter of 24?
Well, there's a couple of them. Where do I start, right?
Presume there might be.
Oh, damn. I guess where I would start is Conor McGregor. Is Conor McGregor going to fight Michael Chandler, or is Conor McGregor going to come back and have the Nate Diaz trilogy? And Nate Diaz comes back and they have the trilogy, because I truly feel like Conor McGregor, if he comes back to the UFC, he's got one fight left. And is it going to be Conor McGregor, or is it going to be the trilogy of Nate Diaz, which he's always promised? What's going to be super interesting to watch is UFC 300 is around the corner. That is a huge deal. That's probably going to fall in April, March at the earliest. And what are they going to do there? Because if Conor McGregor is on the 300 fight card, he's the main event. What are they going to do? They're not going to stack it with title fights. Or on the flip side, do they stack with title fights and they have 3 or 4 title fights for UFC 300? Then Conor McGregor wouldn't be on that card. So Conor McGregor, I'd start with there. Sean Strickland's where I would go next, because he's likely going to be defending early on the middleweight title. And that is such an interesting scenario. I think I was talking to Tim Welsh, Sugar Sean's coach, about this on his podcast the other days. What are they going to do there? Are they going to have Sean Strickland versus Jared Cannonier? Are they going to have Sean Strickland rematch Izzy? Is he going to fight Dricus du Plessis? There's so many different ways to go about who Sean Strickland fights next. Or even, does he fight the winner of Paulo and Khamzat? Is that best for business? There's so many directions to go there. And then maybe if like, let's say he's not fighting Izzy, he's not fighting Dricus, and they pair Izzy and Dricus, that could be a co-main event on a Paulo Costa championship fight card. So I'm interested to see what they do at the middleweight division, because it's always active.
Yeah. Last one from me, Schmo, because I do appreciate a very busy man. Look, anyone who's in MMA kind of media, we all have different goals. I maybe want to get somewhere in a position where you are at the moment, if one day I'm lucky enough to attain that. I'm wondering what your specific goals are for your channel, because a lot of people will look at you and say that you've made it, but anyone in this game has the next goal to set. So what's your goals? Where do you want to take the Schmo?
I appreciate that question. I feel like I've done great in MMA, but I didn't create the Schmo just to be in combat sports. In fact, I was covering boxing before I was covering MMA. The Schmo's for all sports. Combat sports will always be my base, but where I want to take this thing is covering all sports, having a consistent sports show, which I'm currently working on, a live show, having a production team, not just relying on what I can do with Helen and I wearing 7-8 hats all the every day. So what I'm working towards is getting a team, delegating responsibilities, and doing more live content, live shows. This year in 2023, I've been working with an independent promotion in Southern California called Up Next Fighting, doing amateur fights, pro fights. I'm their Schmo Rogan, doing post-fight interviews. I dabble in play-by-play and color, whatever roles they want. I love it. And some of those fighters, a lot of them, I think, will end up in the UFC. And I'll be grateful to say I was able to call their first fights or early fights. And that's something that's very cool for me, that live experience, not worrying about editing. But yes, I want to take this. I built a great brand. Now I want to build a great platform. That's the next phase for me, and that's where I want to take it.
I love it. Look, Schmo, it's great. It was great. It's great to sit down and chat today and meet Dave rather than Schmo. I'm sure people who are watching this will be grateful to see the man behind the glasses and the haircut. I wish you all the continued success with all your channels and all your endeavors. And once again, thank you for your time today.
Of course, Mike. And I just want to say something positive for you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your persistence. Thank you for doing what you do. And I know you're doing great work. I know you're going to continue doing great work. And thanks for having me.